Okay, now we've looked at the concepts of logic, the meaning of the word logic, and the concept of reason, the meaning of the word reason. Let's take a quick look at argument. Now, to speed things up a little bit, let's jump right into the dictionary definition, because I think we're going to see something very interesting about arguments. And an argument, as the dictionary, that is dictionary.com, defines it, is an oral disagreement, verbal opposition, contention, altercation, a violent argument. 2, a discussion involving different points of view, a debate. They were deeply involved in an argument about inflation. The third definition is that an argument is a process of reasoning, a series of reasons. I couldn't follow his argument. Sounds a little bit familiar, like something we've heard in the past. I couldn't follow his logic. Fourth definition of argument is a statement or a reason or fact for or against a point. This is a strong argument in favor of her theory. Notice reason word came up there. And the fifth definition, an address or a composition intended to convince or persuade, persuasive discourse. Okay, so here we see basically that there really an argument can mean two different things. The first one, and this is a dispute, an altercation, or a fight. The idea is it's a disagreement, sometimes involving violence. You could have an argument between the Bloods and the Crips, for example, two gangs, and they're having an argument over whose turf this particular block is, who owns this, who's in charge of this country, who's in charge of this part of the country, this neighborhood, this block, this house, whatever. And that is a sense of the word argument. But I think what we're using in this course, we're really talking about a second sense, a second meaning of the word argument, where an argument's really a set of reasons or statements or that are intended to support or intended to provide evidence for, justify, or make rational or reasonable a certain statement or belief. And that is that an argument is just a set of reasons, and reasons can be expressed in statements. And these reasons are supposed to make it reasonable or rational to believe, provide evidence for, justify, support a particular belief. And in this course from now on, when we're talking about an argument, this is what we are going to be talking about. We're not going to be talking about a dispute, but we will be talking about the set of reasons supposed to support a belief. Now the question is, why are we so interested in arguments, in reasoning? Where do we find them? Is there any reason for us to think that we need to have any of these things? And I want to suggest the following. Where do we find these arguments? We find them all the time. In politics, a presidential election may be coming up. There are disagreements between the candidates. The different candidates hold different positions, and they present arguments, reasons for holding their positions. And that's one place where we find arguments, and it's very important for us to be able to deal with and understand arguments. Another one, which many of you are involved in, are arguments about sports. For example, which team will win the World Series, the Super Bowl, whatever championship, the NCAA national championship in basketball, football, wherever. And people have reasons for thinking one team rather than the other will win, and oftentimes they present arguments in favor of their position. That is to try to convince you to either believe one team or some other will win. science, arguments are found all over the place. They're intended to show things like, whether eating red meat is bad for your health, or whether a vegetarian diet is more healthy. And they cite reasons, they cite studies, they cite facts that are supposed to support a conclusion. In the case of this question like this, in medicine, which is kind of a branch of science, or other areas in science. Public policy, kind of related to politics, but it's the question of what should society be doing. Should the government provide health care to people who do not buy insurance? And we hear many reasons cited, many statements of fact about why people don't have insurance, how many of them aren't covered, and how it's a terrible position, and that's why the government ought to provide them policy. So we hear arguments in that sphere as well. In morality, we hear arguments about, we've talked about whether abortion should be legal, whether the state should compel religious institutions to violate their conscience. Similar kinds of issues come up, and arguments are provided to support a position, a conclusion, one side or the other. And finally, one place where we're bombarded with arguments is in advertising. For example, should I buy the Guess Hondo peep-toe pumps? Maybe some of you, especially the females, would know what the Guess Hondo peep-toe pumps are. I'm not exactly a slave of fashion, but I picked this one up from the internet. That is, the advertisers are trying to sell you various things. So we encounter arguments in all walks of life. And now I think we're beginning to see the connection between logic, reason, and argument. Logic being the connection of reasons to a certain point. Reason being both a faculty, it's ambiguous between a faculty that we use to implement logic, to present arguments for certain positions, and arguments really ultimately the vehicle, as we're talking about, the statements that are cited that are supposed to make other statements reasonable, evident, or rational for us to believe. So it looks like logic, reason, and argument are something that play, or are things that play an important role in our life, and especially in our educational life, but in our life in general, in our life on the job. And it is to this that we're going to be spending a lot of time this semester.